it's important to me that my stuff sounds English, but for no other reason than that it's where I'm from. It's who I am. It's like if you were a Delta blues singer, it would be important to you that your stuff sounding like it came from where you came from. That's the only reason. So I don't want it to sound American or French or Scandinavian or Bulgarian, because it's just not who I want it to sound like who I am.
Hi there, and welcome to This Is Why We Sing, a podcast with me, James Sills, that aims to open up the conversation on singing and look at how it's an important part of being human. In the podcast, I invite guests from a range of different backgrounds and perspectives to discuss how singing really can transform lives. Today's guest is Chris Wood, a singer, guitarist, and one of my all-time favourite songwriters. And it's not true what they say. You really should meet your heroes, because I really enjoyed my conversation with Chris. I've listened back to it 4 or 5 times since, and each time I keep finding new pearls of wisdom that hopefully you will find insightful and inspirational as well. Chris's songs are full of warmth and poetry and observation. His music is quite hard to classify. For many years, he was closely associated with the British folk scene. But in the conversation, we talk about the concept of British soul and why that might be a better definition for the music that he's making. We talk about his formative experiences as a chorister singing English church music and how that sense of Englishness runs through all of his music. Our conversation runs pretty deep at times, and we talk about authenticity, about soul in music, and about the human need to produce and to create. We also talk about a wide range of music and what inspires Chris, which ranges from J.S. Bach to Tom Waits to Motown. If you're not familiar with Chris's music, you might want to listen to some of his songs first, and there's links in the show notes. We recorded this in lockdown in early 2021, Chris in his hometown of Faversham in Kent in the UK, and myself in North Wales. Well, thanks, Chris, for coming on the podcast. The first question that I'm going to ask everybody is, what song's in your head right now?
Well, I'm sitting here trying to write a song. I've got about 3 different songs on the go, and they're all grumpy.
I think you're perfectly entitled to be grumpy.
No, but it's the obvious response, isn't it? You don't. That's the one you don't want. You don't want the obvious response. But I mean, whether anyone will hear the songs is another matter. But you got to kind of get them out. You got to get them written just to work through that.
And then do you sit with them for a while and come back to them, put them in a drawer?
Yeah.
What's your rough kind of process, if there is one?
Yeah, I haven't written enough. I mean, anyone can tell you I haven't written enough stuff to have a process. But I do seem to need a lot of space. That's why it takes me a long time. It's because I need space, I mean, I'll do it, and then I'll have to step well back and think about it. One of the lyrics is, let's have us all a hanging match. Let's catch the first one we can catch. Let's break his windows, burn his thatch. Let's have us all a hanging match. And a hanging match was what in England we used to call a hanging, like a big sort of like a party, hey, let's string him up and spin him round. Let's hang the first one we found. It's just let's spread a blanket on the ground. Let's have us all a hanging match, and it's just, and I wrote that a while ago, but it's that kind of right, the way that the right wing just basically just constantly tap into that anger, the sort of uncontrollable, if everyone's angry about something, and
everything's become so polarized.
Well, it's just they're just tapping into anger, aren't they? Really, and it's and it doesn't matter who the subject of that, who the focus, who that focus falls on, but it's it's just so it's just so sort of bass. Do you know what I mean? And I kind of looked at my songs and I thought, they're a bit flowery, they're a bit too articulate. Let's just try and write something. It's really.
Let's just get down to it. Let's
just
stop skirting around.
Yeah, let's just So that's the kind of place I am right now. But I'd be very surprised if that ends up seeing the light of day. Do you know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah, but you've got to write it and you've got to get it out there in the first place to then sit back and reflect on it. And I guess there's not the opportunity at the moment to actually get out and gig the songs and settle them in that way.
No, definitely not. No, that's that avenue of creativity is closed off to us at the moment.
For the moment.
Yeah.
For the moment. But it will return. It was interesting you talked there about, kind of Englishness and, talking about, that concept of the hanging man and whatever. Because I think there's definitely, there's a strong thread of Englishness that runs through all of your music in a really, really lovely way. And actually, you've talked a little bit there about the right wing, and I guess there'll be some people listening who may well, kind of associate that kind of Englishness, nationalism to that. And that's absolutely not what I'm talking about. And that's something I'm really interested actually in discussing with you, Chris. But could I take it back to the church? Because I believe this is where you had your first musical experience and exposure to this sense of Englishness. So could you tell us a bit about your days as a chorister?
They were almost certainly like anyone else's days as a chorister. It's a very prescribed world. There's nothing. I don't think there's anything particular about the church I was in comparison to sort of any other C of E church up and down the land. The cathedrals, that's on another level, but it was just it was. Well, many times I've looked back at that time and I have felt that I was probably making the best music I was ever going to make in my life at the age of 8.
What, and you were thinking that at the time?
No, I wasn't thinking that at the time. I wasn't really thinking anything, and I think that's one of the reasons.
I guess you don't, When you're a kid, you don't. You just take everything as it comes. It's just normal.
Yeah. And these sensational pieces, Bird, Gibbons, Tallis, Boyce, Bach, you're singing this stuff, and you're getting, you're singing the treble line as well. So, but you're being backed up by these sensational basses and the sinuous alto lines, and oh man, it was so formative, and I think the way, it was formative in so much as it did a lot to form who I am, but it was music that had form. It had real form, and the way that we were trained. The boy choristers, the choir schools never closed. In the Reformation, when the Reformation happened, the choir schools carried on. Wow. And so the way that boys have been trained, it's obviously changed over the years, but it's evolved, and it's evolved naturally over something like 1,100 years. Boys have been taught how to sing, and latterly girls as well, in some of the cathedral choirs, yeah. And so, that's not nothing. That's not nothing. And I think that was formative for me as well. It was the idea that you were singing something that meant something, that came from somewhere, that owed itself to something. It never ever felt makey-uppy. It never felt frothy. Right. It never felt like it was just sort of sitting on the surface. It felt as deep could be. I was only 8, so I didn't know anything about it, but it felt, as I say, it felt proper.
At what point was it that you kind of started to reflect on this? There are so many kind of resonances that obviously that experience had, musical and cultural and otherwise. Was there anything that kind of prompted you to reflect on that in that way?
No, I don't think there was anything that prompted me to. I mean, once I started to get into kind of English folk music a little bit, I then started to realise that the English hymnal, which we had been singing from, had been put together by Vaughan Williams, and
Right.
and so a lot of the tunes that I'd grown up with, it turns out, were much older than the words that they'd been set to in the English hymnal. Vaughan Williams used a lot of traditional English music in that, and the really love. So in a way, the first time I heard, see, if you go to all the sort of folk song collectors and Sharp and all the old wax cylinders and the field recordings and that, what you get is sort of solo unaccompanied singing.
Mm-hmm.
I sow my seeds of, that's what you hear. It's just the one voice. You hear these beautiful kind of melodic lines. But the first time I heard English music, in inverted commas, folk music, was with four-part harmony. It's
Right.
absolutely
Yeah,
gorgeous, rich, deep harmonies, and it really, really went in, there's no way it'll ever be dislodged.
And do you think you can draw like a direct line between that and between what you're doing today in your songwriting? Because we're talking about, in some way, very different musical worlds. But what remains of that experience, you think, in your songwriting today?
Well, I mean, it's not going to be a lyric thing, is it? Really, I mean, what we're talking about is the musical content, and I kind of, it's still there. The thing is, I want to write. I can't pretend I'm Tom Waits. I can't pretend, I'm Sleaford Moths. I can't pretend that I'm some old blues guy. So my stuff has to have kind of shape and form and stuff. And, I can't just strum a chord endlessly through a distorted guitar and bark out something, or I just can't do it, which is probably what that hanging match lyric will end up as, some sort of sort of masturbatory strumming nonsense, just
but
to
probably
get it
very cathartic.
Well, yeah, who knows, I'll probably do it at the Village Fete or something like that. But so my stuff's got this kind of this kind of shape and form,
Yeah.
And I think that comes from there. And it's the cadences as well. It's the way that you get those kind of leading harmonies that lead you into the next cadence, and I just love that. And that the way that the parts will move over each other. So when I did stuff with the trumpet, with the trombone and the cello, that's kind of what I was looking for.
Right, so almost like kind of like the counterpoint of the different
exactly,
lines.
yeah. So, I mean, the thing is, you can take any kind of song melody and you can arrange it however you like. I mean, you could probably take one of my melodies and somebody who knew what they were doing could make it sound like Shostakovich. I mean, there's no, I'm trying not to get too precious about it. I suppose that's what I'm saying.
No, and I think it's just very healthy just to look at it as music, and like you say, it can go in any number of directions. And I've always felt a bit of a musical chameleon without a particular musical home. And actually, it's really healthy just to kind of make these sideways moves, because why shouldn't someone rooted in as a chorister then be writing the type of songs that you're writing? Like, to me, it does make perfect sense. And I think that,
well, while we're on, James, what type of songs am I writing? Because I have no idea.
Do you know what? The last time I saw you, Chris, perform, which I think was 2017, when you were touring your So Much to Defend album, I think you described yourself as English soul.
Oh, that was somebody else had said that.
Had they?
That's what it was.
I really like that.
That's somebody had written that, and I thought, well, yeah, that's kind of what I'm trying to do. I mean, it's important. It's important to me that my stuff sounds English, but for no other reason than that it's where I'm from. It's who I am. It's like if you were a Delta blues singer, it would be important to you that your stuff sounding like it came from where you came from. That's the only reason. So I don't want it to sound American or French or Scandinavian or Bulgarian, because it's just not who I am. I want it to sound like who I am. But as I get older, the only thing that I'm interested in, and I think it's the active ingredient that makes people basically forget themselves with music, I think, is soul.
Yeah.
That's what music does better than anything else. Painting, not really. Painting can have soul, I suppose, technically, but Jesus, it's music, music. Carpentry, I suppose, can have soul, but these things just look silly next to music. It just drips from music.
When I was thinking about our conversation today, Chris, I was thinking, quite often Chris Wood, singer, guitarist, songwriter, fiddle player, blah blah. You get this big list of things. And actually, you're all of those things. But actually, the thing about songwriting and about music is just the bringing together of all of those elements. If that just doesn't sound, too obvious. So if I just again think back to, the most recent album I was talking about, it's the thing that makes the album is just that interaction of, that beautiful vintage guitar sound, the lyrics, the beautiful kind of observation and the commentary, whatever you want to call it, and then your vocal delivery as well, and I guess the production. But I think the reason it's so powerful and why music as a medium is so powerful is because any of those three elements on their own would be conveying something. They'd be conveying meaning. Yeah, I could happily listen to your guitar parts just on their own all day. But then we have the human voice, and then we have the lyrical delivery, And so then it just becomes this elevated thing. I think that's why songs are so powerful.
Yeah, I guess they are. I suppose what you're doing there is you're pointing out to us just how much is going on when we hear someone singing a song. And because music has been made so ubiquitous, we have understandably forgot just how much is going on when somebody makes a song and a record. Yeah.
Exactly. But I also think that with your music, Chris, there's just such a kind of an authenticity and a realness, and just there's a sense you're saying you're not going to try and sound like Tom Waits, because he does that really well, and actually you're so great at being Chris Wood, because I think every one of those things that I've described, I really think particularly like the last kind of 3 albums or so, it's so idiosyncratic, and I think part of that is the vocal delivery. I know this is broadly a podcast about singing, but if we maybe shed a light on that, and again, it might seem quite artificial to separate it from the other elements, but there's something in the way that you deliver your songs that has such a ring of truth and realness, and that it's coming from a real person with real emotions and so forth. And I wonder how kind of conscious that is in your approach to recording your vocals, to the way you deliver your vocals, to the production.
No, I mean, all the thinking, any thinking about those things has happened long before you get into the studio. Long before there's a microphone in front of you. You if you're writing your life, and you're choosing to carry on and record that song. So I might write songs that I'm not going to record. The reason I'm going to kind of record the ones I record is because I have a sneaky feeling that my life chimes with other people's lives. So that's what makes the grade. That's why I might write Summerfield Avenue and record it, because I just had a feeling lots of other people had that experience, And so there's no question about how I'm going to sing it or vocal delivery or whatever. It's all happened before that. Do you know what I mean? It's like the difference between butterflies and moths. Butterflies, fantastic. They get all the kind of press. But moths, basically, as far as I understand it, I'm sure you've got some people listening who really know about this sort of thing.
Do you know what? Actually, there's someone.
Yeah, there's there's always
no,
someone.
all I'm saying, there might be someone listening. There's someone who we have an open mic session that I run after my online singing group called the Sofa Singers, and they have like all these moths, and they wheel them out every week. These kind of giant moths.
Fantastic.
So anyway,
look, the thing is that the distinction is that apparently moths, the colorings and the patterns on moths are very, very closely associated with their food plant, and so in a way they're kind of wearing their heart on their sleeve. So a moth can't fly off somewhere else and pretend to fit in. That's the only place it can be is right there. So a moth's not thinking, what's my vocal delivery like here? What should I do on this? What should I do on that? It's basically, it's just being what it is, and it can't pretend. No amount of artifice will ever sort of have anyone else fooled. And so, I mean, like I say, soul is the thing I'm interested in. And the thing about soul is that it can't be faked. It can't be, there's no soul button on in the studio. There's no, and people obsess over things like microphones. Oh yeah, you've got to have this microphone because it's a tube microphone from 90. I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's true, but if you're obsessing over that, you're probably losing sight of what it is you've come to do. So I'll go to a certain point. So like my guitar, it was like, I mean, I've said this at gigs and stuff, but it was like the kind of Harry Potter moment where Harry goes to sort of choose his wand and they lay some wands out in front of him, and he's sort of just reaching for one, and whoever the shop assistant is, oh no, Mr. Potter, one doesn't choose the wand chooses you. And it was with my guitar, it was exactly like that. I mean, I just picked this thing up, and it was just like, oh yeah, right, And this was in Denmark Street, and there were 5 guitars the same. There were 2 Epiphones, the same as mine, and then there were 3 Gibsons, which were the same. It was the same. It's a Gibson E125 is the same as my Epiphone. So there were 5 guitars, and I spent the week going backwards and forwards up and down the street, and a couple of the others were better guitars. I mean, they had better resale value. They were more set up. They were more balanced. They were better guitars. But the one I went back to was that first one. I was always gonna, and I bought it. And so if we go back to the choir thing, when I walk out on stage now or into a studio, no matter how hostile the environment might be, if I've got that guitar with me, I never feel on my own.
Wow.
And that's kind of what I'm talking about. It's that soul thing. So it's me and the guitar, and we're out there together. And now the amp as well. I've got the right amp and that. So it's me and the guitar and the amp, and there's all sorts of harmonics coming off. This thing's not doing what I'm telling it to do all the time. Sometimes it's doing what it's just like it would do if there was a tenor stood behind you, or something.
Right.
It's got that same kind of excitement and compelling sort of fascination, and so the last thing you're thinking about is, oh, should I put a comma in here, or how should I deliver this vocal or that? You've written the song, it means something, you just are it, like the moth. You just do it. So I don't think about it.
That. No, that's kind of the answer I expected, but it's really great to hear it and to hear that explanation and to hear that lovely analogy, because so much music today is so sanitized and so produced and so kind of I guess baseless in terms of where it's been produced. It could be produced anywhere, and I think just that it's like going back to that tradition, like the choral tradition. You are part of something bigger, there's a sense of where it's coming from. There's a sense of rootedness, and I think that really, really comes across in your writing in a really powerful way. I love that concept of English soul. I think that's I think that's great. We don't need a big long list of the things that you.
Well, if you extend that to British soul, which of course we should do anyway, I mean, if you had a British soul section in a record shop, you'd have John Martin in there.
Oh,
you'd have
John Martin.
Ronnie Lane.
I could talk about John Martin all night, but we'll do that on a different
Ronnie
podcast.
Lane. You'd have in there. There'd be all sorts of really, really sort of beautiful. Frankie Miller. Just beautiful, beautiful stuff. When an old cricketer leaves the crease. Do you know that one?
No.
What's his name? Come on, you know this. You've got this. I can't remember his name now, but it's just beautiful, beautiful song. Look it up. When an old cricketer leaves the crease, kills me every time. It's got a big brass band on it.
Oh, wonderful! I will do. So I guess you would these days. Would you? As musicians, we hate classification, don't we, and being pigeonholed. But for me, English soul sits with me far better than, say, Chris Wood, folk musician.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is, it's not for me to say, is it? What label I would like to have? Do you know what I mean? I of those two, I prefer English soul, but it's something that it sounds like only you and I seem to understand what it means, right now.
Great. Well, we'll hopefully we'll start that. We'll start it again. We'll get it cast out there, and more people will pick up on it. Definitely.
Yeah.
Now, I want to talk about allotments briefly, Chris. Bear with me on this one.
Go on.
And I know you're what's the term? Allotmentier?
Allotmentier, I suppose. Yeah.
Is it allotmentier? Yeah. I know it's something that is as much part of you as your singing, and I'm wondering if there are kind of parallels that we can draw here between that and singing, because I have a real belief that when people kind of sing and are singing and are part of a singing experience, and they're becoming the performer, they are instigating the experience, they're not being a passive receiver. I can kind of see a direct line between that and actually growing your own vegetables and, ceasing just to be a cog in the kind of consumption machine. It feels important as humans to produce things and to create things. I wonder if you kind of see that in the same way. I guess what I'm alluding to is that I feel so much of our lives are outsourced these days, whether it's singing or music or food, and actually just to kind of take charge of one's own, the facets of your everyday life has got to be good, has got to be empowering.
Yeah, I mean, it clearly does us good. It's a lot of these containers since Brexit, a lot of containers, it's kind of been revealed now, although we all kind of knew it anyway. But a lot of the containers that are leaving our shores are empty. Our biggest export is fresh air. We don't make shit anymore. We haven't done for a long time. Not since Thatcher, not since 79, We just haven't made things. We don't make things. We shuffle things. We do services. We shuffle things around. We make a little percentage on this, and then we sell it on. We kind of shift and dodge and weave, and or we're working in call centres. Trying to help people with. We don't. People don't know what it is to make things. Like even fucking apple pie, It's so these things on the telly now where they sell you the box with all the ingredients in. I mean, it's just so crass, It's so it's such a sort of an impoverished. It's such a sort of corporate misunderstanding of what it is to make an apple pie. You don't buy a thing with a box with all the things in it to make an apple pie. You don't. That's not what you do. If you're going to make an apple pie, you sit down and you think, oh yeah, apple pie, and you start to think about it. Well, pastry, how's that done? And you find out a little bit about pastry. You find out about apples, different apples. And the next thing you know, you really know. You sit down and you eat that, and your friends eat it, and they don't have to say, wow, man, that's a really sensational apple pie. You know it is. You know it's not the best apple pie ever made, but you know that was an apple. You made an apple pie, and nobody can ever take that away from you. And it's you know you've done the right thing when you get that feeling that nobody can take that away from you. Nobody can lean over. When I was playing the fiddle, I mean, in Ireland, if you play the fiddle, somebody will lean over and say, "Of course, Frankie Gavin would have played that much better." It's just you just can't do that anywhere. But when you've done the real thing, like eating your own leeks on Christmas Day, we had 5 vegetables, and they all came out of the allotment, every single one, except, in fact, we don't have the allotment now because we've moved. So the place we've moved to there's a big garden. So that's why we moved, so that we've got the stuff out in the garden. But
so you're producing songs in your studio that I'm speaking to you from now. You're growing your veg in the garden.
Yeah.
I
mean, I am, and since we've moved here, there's so much to do on the place that it's occurred to me that really I ought to learn carpentry. It's something I've always loved and I've always been fascinated by, and so now I'm reading a lot about. I'm just getting a small toolkit together, and I'm going to build a workbench so that I can repair this place. I can fix this place. I can replace windows and doors, and because I just why wouldn't I?
Well, exactly. And I think, and that's where I think that, talking about whether it is growing your veg and cooking your own food or actually being an active participant in singing or whatever, I can see how all these things are basically the same thing that we're talking about. And actually, whilst we're talking about carpentry, I'm just thinking my friend Piers, who we play music, we write music together as a Rough Island band down in the Isles of Scilly. But I mean, he is like most people who live in the Isles of Scilly, has many, many hats. But he's a musician. He's an amazing carpenter. He's just come and done some amazing work in our house. And he is a chef. He's a trained chef as well. And what he always says was that thing that I think you just almost alluded to, Chris. Like, it's not actually about like excellence in terms of I'm gonna, be the best carpenter in the world, or I'm gonna make the best Michelin style meal. Like, it is the best already because you're doing it yourself. It's got that soul in it that you were talking about. It's something that can't be taken away from me.
They can't tax that, can they?
Exactly.
They would if they could, but they haven't found a way of doing it yet. Yeah.
And I think
smugness.
For me,
it's called smugness, James.
I realise we're getting very close to smug territory, aren't we?
Yeah.
Talking about all of these things, but the thing is, these are just core things that humans have always done, and it's very, it is very recent that these things have kind of been, like I say, outsourced to the point where a lot of us hadn't had the experience of making an apple pie, and we have to buy a kit to help us back into doing that.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, and I think. I guess if anything is kind of my mission with singing, it's just to stop people, for people to stop obsessing about, measuring up to somebody else and just letting it be an expression of themselves and their situation. Whilst we're talking about the choir thing, Chris, I've got to say the opening line of the album, So Much to Defend, the opening lyric. About the choir practice, just fantastic. I mean, I'd really encourage people listening to listen to the song and the whole album. But it's just this beautiful series of kind of vignettes and portraits in the song. And the first line is Sharon loves her cooking sauce. Her daughter lives upstairs. Wednesday night is choir practice, and Sharon does the chairs. I just listened to that. I thought, yes, I so get what you're talking about here. Is there anything you can add to that, or does that just speak for itself?
Well, it's supposed to speak for itself, really. I mean, it's somebody wrote a book, didn't they, called The God of Small Things. I really think that it's the small things that really matter to me. It's the small things that make something meaningful. So today I was reading a bit of George Orwell recounting witnessing a hanging in Burma. And in it, he talks about how the condemned man was kind of led out, and he's trying to articulate what this feels like, and the guy's led out, and then he sort of moves to one side to avoid a puddle. And Orwell latches onto that moment, and it's in those, life is in these, meaning is in these small things. Communication in the world that we're living in now has become so broad brush. People shout at each other in estuary English because they've seen it on the telly. They think EastEnders is how people actually behave, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. People do behave like that, or Hollyoaks. It's just, but real life is not. It's not like that. Real life is in really, really tiny things. The idea of this guy wanting to avoid a puddle moments before his life was going to end. It's just so touching.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to bring that to bear in that song. That song's just basically full. It's littered with tiny, tiny moments.
Yeah.
You could argue it's too dense. There's too much of that in there.
Oh, it's great. I actually, when I listen to that, it feels very kind of visual for me. It feels like when you're on a train and you kind of get little glimpses into the back of people's houses and their gardens.
People have said that, yeah.
Have they?
Yeah, several people have said that, yeah. Yeah, it's kind of what it is, really. It's just snap, 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 cameras going off. Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you for that. What musically kind of keeps you topped up? We've talked about so much, we've talked about choral music and Vaughan Williams and Sleaford Moths. Is there anything, that what you're listening to at the moment that's kind of keeping you, inspired or on your toes or comforted?
I've always listened to Tom Waits.
I knew I like you, Chris. I'm a big Tom Waits.
I've always listened to Tom Waits for a kind of for several reasons, but he's very, very complicated. I think I was talking about this to someone else the other day. We were talking about authenticity, and a lot of the people I know whose opinion I respect, who don't kind of like Tom Waits or don't get Tom Waits, it's usually they don't feel that he's authentic because he can be this person or this character or this character, or he can be all German industrial, or he can be all kind of sort of old sad vaudevillian, or he can be whatever he wants and that. And it occurred to me that I think the more talented a person is, the harder it is to be authentic. When you really can do all those things, it's not a show. He does those things because he has to do them. He has to do the kind of industrial. He has to do that.
Yeah.
He has to do that. Why would he not do that?
Yeah.
He can do it, and he does it impeccably. And then he'll sit down at a piano or write a song like "A tinker, a tailor, a soldier's things, his rifle, his boots," and he'll write that, and he just break your heart. I'm gonna love you till the wheels come off. Just so talented. And then I started to really listen to the production on his stuff, the sound of everything. And then I started to focus in on the 3 albums, Alice, Blood Money and Mule Variations. And I found out that they were kind of mixed and engineered by a guy called Oz Fritz. And a couple of years ago, I was invited to produce someone's album. And once we'd recorded it, they said, "Who do you want to mix it?" And I said, "Well, I want Oz Fritz to mix it." And they said, "Well, phone him up." So I did. The next thing I knew, I was on the plane to LA to go and sit down with San Francisco to spend a week in the studio with Oz Fritz. And so, if we come back to the idea of kind of music and the complexity, you were talking earlier, weren't you, about just how much goes into somebody writing a song and singing it and recording it and making, such a lot goes into that. Well, I suppose in many ways, what Tom Waits has done, and finding out what I've found out and working with people who've worked with him, I've begun to really appreciate just how much does go into a song. And it's really made me, Oz didn't say, "Oh yeah, here's a bunch of tips and tricks." I didn't ask him any questions about working with Tom Waits, and he didn't volunteer. He told me one thing actually, which was that the only instruction that he got from Tom Waits, he said, Tom said, "I want you to make me sound like you're in a doll's house and I'm singing in through the window."
There's no plug-in for that, is there?
No, and somehow that's exactly what Oz did. There are tracks on there where it's just sort of hair-raising, the amount of thought and consideration. So you see that we're not talking about singing here, but what we're talking about is if Tom wants me to make him sound like he's singing in through a doll's house window, then I really need to think about where I'm going to put this fucking mic, because if I put it too far away, or if I put it too close, or on axis, off axis, and so you begin to realise just what a dance making a record is, committing to a recording, what an incredible ballet it is of talents and gifts and skills, And so when you meet a performer who's that talented, then, it seems to me that kind of, oh, well, I don't think he's very authentic because he can do all these other... It's just nonsense. I mean, this guy's... He's just very, very... He's a real musician. He really is. And so he's always been a touchstone for me.
So for the podcast, there is a playlist. All the guests that I invite on, whatever spectrum of the kind of singing world they're coming from, choose a track to go on there, a vocal performance of some kind. So I wonder if there's something you could select for us to put on there and for people to listen to, Chris.
Well, I suppose it should be a Tom one, shouldn't it, really? It sort of makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm either thinking Alice or Get Behind the Mule. I don't mind. You put whichever one you want on.
Okay. I'll make a decision.
Get Behind the Mule, because that's how that album got named. Mule Variations.
Mule Variations.
Yeah, he wasn't sure how to do it, and he did about 8 completely plausible different versions of it. You could have just made an album of just Get Behind the Mule. And in the end, he kind of started to round on the version that we all get to hear. But then Alice is just such a sensational song, it's the imagery just kills me,
Oh, there was some Tom Waits songs
Skated
to listen to.
What's it? I skated something about being out on the ice. I skated your name, and by tracing it twice, I fell through the ice of Alice. I mean, you can see it skating the big A and the L. I mean, and then he does it a second time and falls through. I mean, that's great. To me, that's like the Pyramids. That's just sensational human achievement to have written that. Just
to close the conversation, would you be able to just share a life lesson that, singing, a life of singing and songwriting has taught you?
I suppose the better you get, the poorer you become. That's kind of what it seems to be teaching me. I mean, I'm kind of going through that right now, and that's kind of what's happening. You know, I'm getting better and better at it, and I'm earning less and less money each year. And I think it's because the closer I get to sort of singing and really kind of coming across with what it is I want to come across, you know, the less I'm concerned about whether or not people like it, you know.
And then in that, is there a sense that you're kind of, you know, closer to being what you want to be doing, what you want to be saying, you know?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the closer, you know, the better you get, the closer you get, then the less you care. Yeah.
And sometimes not caring is good. You know, we spend so much of our life looking over our shoulder, thinking what others are thinking. You know, that is healthy. It's definitely healthy.
I don't know. I mean, maybe I need a bit of a rocket up the arse, you know, clip round the ear. But I'm just where I am, you know, and
yeah,
I'm old dog, new tricks, you know. That's kind of where I am, so I'm happy.
What a lovely way to wrap up. Thanks so much to Chris for that conversation. I found it nourishing in so many ways. Now, if you go to the show notes, you'll find links to some of Chris's songs, including the song we were discussing, So Much to Defend, and there's also a live version of This Love Won't Let You Fail. Both are absolutely stunning examples of his songwriting, so do check them out. There's also a link to Chris's music on Bandcamp, where you can discover his back catalogue, stream and download his music there. And the song that I chose for the playlist was Alice. He just described it so beautifully, and I'm sure if you have a listen to it on the podcast playlist, you'll agree. There's a link there as well to the podcast playlist, where you'll not only hear Chris's choice, but all the choices by the guests we've had so far in Series 1. So do go back and have a listen to any episodes you might have missed. Like I said at the beginning of the podcast, I invite guests from a whole range of perspectives. So go back and you can listen to conversations with choir leaders and authors and many, many more. If you want to get in touch with me, you can find me at my website, jamessillsmusic.com. There's a link in the show notes. It would be really lovely to hear from you for any feedback on the show, for any guests you might be interested in for future episodes. And as always, a review and a rating on Apple Podcasts is really, really appreciated. It helps get the word out, not just about the podcast, but of course about singing, which is what we're all about here. So thanks very much again for joining me and Chris for today's conversation, and look forward to welcoming you again to This Is Why We Sing. Bye for now.